On Tuesday night, I chose to see Knock at the Cabin. I went to the theater intrigued but skeptical. M. Night, at least for me, seems to be a filmmaker of extremes. He's made one of the most formative thrillers of my childhood with a twist so iconic, you know what I'm talking about before I even say it. But he's also made The Last Airbender. He's made a film purely designed around using the acting abilities of James McAvoy as a vehicle, yet managed to make this film into an engaging and intense thriller. He's also made The Beach That Makes You Old. So I did kind of anticipate spinning a roulette wheel of fate when I walked into the theater Tuesday. One that, based on my own personal tastes and experiences, had the odds stacked against me. Shyamalan's movies tend to be things I don't enjoy more often than I do, so I was not really expecting much of anything. All I was expecting was a twist, because, well, you know. In fact, the linchpin of my decision-making process was that Knock at the Cabin had a more convenient showtime than Infinity Pool, so I really did not go in with high hopes. But I am pleased to report that I was pleasantly surprised. I ended up thoroughly enjoying almost every aspect of Knock at the Cabin, from its premise to its score, from its performances to its story. Even set dressing, minor plot elements, and props seem to have a sense of craftsmanship to them that I can't help but value. Is it the greatest script in the world? Not really, no. Is it an interesting script that creates engaging conflict for the characters who you care about? Absolutely. And at the end of the day, that's what I'm really here for. That's what was delivered to me, and that's, for the most part, why I enjoyed the film and the experience that it allowed me to have. It's not the dialogue or the writing, but the relationships in this story that are the core of what makes the audience buy into the entire thing. If you don't truly believe this is an impossible decision to make, if you can't understand the perspectives presented to our protagonists and the choices that they need to wrestle with, then there's either slim or zero chance you end up enjoying the movie. But at least for now, that's not what I want to talk about. I'd like to discuss something somewhat unique to Knock at the Cabin. It is at the very core of the film, and it is one of the gears that allows it to function in the way that it does. It is the essence of what permits this kind of slow burn thriller to exist: structure. Structure is vital to every movie, but it is much more evident in how it impacts the viewing experience in Knock at the Cabin. The most obvious instance of this is found in the four horsemen who come to the titular cabin. Each are played uniquely. Each make captivating characters in their own right who might be equal parts insane and prophetic. And they are the cogs in the narrative machine. Each has a purpose to serve. Each has their mark to hit. Each has their role to play in bringing the full weight of Eric and Andrew's decision down upon them. But collectively, they're different. They function as a sort of shot clock for Knock at the Cabin and its viewers. And this is vital to the viewing experience. See, when you're writing a screenplay, you're almost making a contract with the audience. You're promising to keep them entertained, to keep them engaged and tell them a story they will want to experience, to give them a narrative that keeps them fascinated and maybe provides a little message about life along the way. But the main requirement for all of this is that they are entertained. That's your baseline. An audience that isn't entertained is not a receptive audience. And viewers can be fickle. They want to know what's going on. They want to know how long it's going to take to get us to our destination. One of the worst things any audience member can be thinking as they're watching your film, or as they're reading your story, is, how much longer is this going to take? You pray they don't pull out their phones or glance at their watches to see what time it is, to check how deep into the runtime they are right now. How can you prevent this from happening? How can you ensure that even in your narrative's slower moments, where you're letting your characters breathe and be a bit more vulnerable when the plot doesn't demand action, how can you ensure these moments are just as captivating as your intense sequences? Enter the Four Horsemen. On top of being our antagonists, they're a visual representation of progress. Each of them marks a milestone in the film. With the roles of each played out, they indicate critical moments, essential steps toward the film's inevitable conclusion. So even when an audience member might be growing weary, they have these characters to anchor them to your story and its sense of completion, to remind them that you're moving along, and to give them a visual representation of just how close everything is to coming to your fiery finale. This is so important in a film like Knock at the Cabin, a film where there are only really 7 characters, with just one main location. It would be so easy for a contained thriller like this to fall flat and to bore its audience, especially since it's not closer to horror and there are relatively minimal blood and guts and action set pieces. If you have that audience's trust, you can rely on these four horsemen to keep them in check and to keep your viewers from fidgeting in their seats. They know you're working towards the finish line. They can see it through your horsemen. And if you've done your job up to this point, they'll put their trust into you and into this film and allow themselves to just enjoy it. The structure and pacing brought into Knock at the Cabin and represented through the Four Horsemen and their visions is not the most complicated of concepts, but it's one that is essential to crafting a great movie-going experience. And it's one I feel Knock at the Cabin does exceptionally well, especially when it could be so easy for it to fail. But all of this relies on the audience trusting you to begin with. How do you get there? How do you get that trust? How do you get the benefit of the doubt when it seems viewers are more critical and responsive than ever? Enter the opener. This is your one shot. This is the microcosm of your film. This is where you teach everyone in the theater seats how they're meant to watch your movie, how they're meant to engage with it. Openers establish mood, atmosphere, the world your narrative takes place in. Is it absurdist, intense, bombastic? This is where all of that is determined. Take Raiders of the Lost Ark, for example, perhaps the most famous opening sequence of all time. It's a film all its own. It shows you the world of Indiana Jones. It compares and contrasts Indiana Jones to his allies, his enemies. It shows you his fears, his faults, his strengths, and his weaknesses. It even gives personality through his interactions with an inanimate idol. And it does all of this while being supremely entertaining. There's so much that an opener can do and so much goodwill for it to earn. And I must say the opening 10 minutes or so of Knock at the Cabin are a home run for me. Even the opening credits I feel do a lot to set up the film. They allow you to establish the mentality you want for this movie, introduce the air of mystery and a looming threat, a ride that seems worth being a part of. The credits allow you to settle in and open yourself to the experience that is promised to follow. Then you just get a really fun display of craft from Shyamalan. Say what you will about his scripts and final products, but it is undeniable that the man can direct. He knows his way around a camera. You're brought into this forest with a very shallow depth of field. Some foliage is made to be crystal clear, while other bits of it are blurred with their details imperceptible. Focus racks back and forth as we track along the undergrowth and settle finally on a grasshopper. It's not the fanciest of camera maneuvers, but it's one that helps you feel comfortable with the film. It shows a competency in its craft. It shows skill that grants the film some merit and trust. We're along for a ride that was carefully designed at the very least. One that will be professional, be intricate, and be made with care. And from there we meet Wen, and we meet Leonard. They're not the main characters, but they are the characters who allow us to understand this world and the people in it. Understand the elements of the story being introduced to us. We see Wen to be a child, but a competent, intelligent child. We see Leonard to be an adversary, but a nuanced and genuine adversary. More antagonist than villain. One who seems to display true emotion, empathy, and even remorse. We get all of this in the first 10 minutes, and for me, it was more than enough to buy what the film was selling in its entirety. I was promised complicated characters, and I got them in spades. Even without the world's strongest screenplay, each actor gets plenty to chew on. There's not a single weak link in this cast. Each person in that cabin has layers to them, nuances to their performances that you get to mull over and consider during the film's quieter moments. Are they honest? What are their intentions? Who's in the right here? What is the right choice to make? Who am I even rooting for in this moment? A film that can make me ask these questions and at times make me genuinely uncertain of my answers is a film that I'm glad I saw. It's a film where I'm not even sure what I want to be true, let alone know what's true. The truth feels entirely malleable from one moment to the next, and I wasn't even sure who I could take at their word for most of the runtime. Even your relationship to each character seems to flip on a dime, being completely fluid. You're rooting for our heroes in one moment, but sympathizing and supporting the antagonists in another. It's a testament to the story and the performances by Bautista, Groff, Aldridge, Amuka Bird, and Quinn. All that being said, it's a definite recommendation for Knock at the Cabin. There's a lot to like and appreciate in the film, and it's worth seeing in theaters, in my opinion. I rate it a 3.5 out of 5 stars, and will leave you with my Letterboxd review that I feel accurately describes the sort of experience this movie has the potential to provide. This was for the antagonists, by the way. So yeah, see this. Until next time.